So there are times when one is invited to speak at a conference, and you'll sort of sit there and watch the speaker before you and think to yourself, I'm about to contradict everything this guy is saying. But I am very pleased to say today is not one of those days. So I agree with Adam, and in fact, he set me up perfectly for what I'm about to talk about, which is the way we do consumer insights research at Microsoft Advertising. And it's a little bit different. So traditionally, we focus, in particular in digital, on analytics. And analytics can tell you a lot about what consumers do. But it can't really tell you much about why they do it. And it's becoming increasingly important, as we all know, to understand the why, because consumers are now pulling in content on their own terms. And if we don't have a deeper understanding of their motivations for doing that, we're not going to be able to meet them in their moment. And instead, we'll be sort of forced to continue to push out interruptive messages from a marketer perspective instead. So we're really trying to sort of switch the dichotomy a little bit and focus more on consumers and bringing marketers closer to consumers through platforms like mobile technology, Xbox, Surface, and so forth. So today, we are going to talk about moms and their multi-screening behavior. We're going to talk about what they do, but more importantly, we're going to talk about why they do it. And at the very end, I'll show you some examples as well. So first and foremost, you go out and you talk to moms. They have new needs when they have kids. They have to get more done than ever before. And they turn to technology to do it. And in fact, 76% of moms in the US agree that the only way they can get anything done is to use 2 or more screens simultaneously. And moms are 25% more likely in the US to own 5 or more devices. And in fact, 73% say that they never watch television or a movie for 2 hours without picking up a second device. For marketers, this presents a tremendous amount of challenge, because while we might have figured out how to advertise on television and how to advertise on computers through digital, and we're starting to get there on mobile, we haven't necessarily figured out how to combine all of these channels to meet the consumer motivation in any given time. Well, one of the things that I'm tasked with doing at Microsoft is to create frameworks that help our customers sort of simplify the complicated digital ecosystem. And then I also feed back what I find to our engineering teams, which is a very different audience. And in fact, I'm not a quant, I'm more of a qualitative type researcher. But if I don't have numbers, those guys will break out in a cold sweat like you wouldn't believe. So I will show you numbers today as well. So what we've established for multi-screening is that there are 4 common pathways that consumers engage in when it comes to using screens simultaneously or sequentially. And the first one is what we call content grazing. So content grazing is a pathway that is almost the status quo for all of us. In fact, the original image I had for content grazing was of a cow chewing grass in a field, because we are almost all sort of cows, constantly grazing on content. Ultimately, my marketing team made me take that away because it's off-brand, but that doesn't mean I can't talk about it on occasion. So the second pathway is called investigative spiderwebbing. This is simultaneous usage for the purpose of investigating or finding out more information. The third is called social spiderwebbing. Similar pattern, but again, the motivation and the intent, the why behind it, is really about connection and belonging. And then finally, the fourth is called quantum. Quantum is sequential multi-screening. There's usually a very specific goal that consumers have within this pathway. They start something on one screen, and then they move to another to finish it. So we're going to go into a little bit more depth on each of these patterns. And you can see the incidence numbers here. And I would say, this is where Adam had a great point, it's less about demographic here and more about the fact that we're all doing these things because we're human beings and we're fulfilling these deeper needs. So you can see there's not a lot of difference in numbers when you isolate moms versus the general population in terms of how they're engaging. But some of the motivations are different, and of course that's because at different points in your life you have very different needs. So content grazing, again, absolutely the most common behavior. This is when you're engaging with 2 forms of content simultaneously. So you might be watching a television show and you pick up your mobile phone to text a friend, but you're not texting them about the television show. Your brain is actually doing 2 different things at once. Now, if you talk to consumers about content grazing and you ask them, what are you doing right now? They'll tell you, oh, I'm multitasking. And this is where it gets really important to start using some ethnographic techniques to get underneath that. Because are they really multitasking? Probably not. So as we dug into this more deeply, we found that this is probably the most habit-forming of all of the pathways. And in fact, the reason that consumers are doing it isn't necessarily to get things done. It's more about control and taking content and turning it on and off and finding these quick moments of distraction. And for moms in particular, we found that content grazing was about having a tiny moment of escape, a little bit of me time, where she could quickly pull up a casual game on her phone, or she could quickly check a social network because she needed that sort of 30-second break. Now, for marketers, this is challenging, of course, because content grazing doesn't give you a lot of time to engage a consumer. She's in a pretty distracted state of mind here. So it really is about this sort of quick bites of information that's very entertaining, fun to engage with. And then ideally, if it's compelling enough, you can try to convert her into one of the other pathways, which do have deeper implications for brand and also direct response as well. So you can see here, this is part of the reason why we don't think that content grazing is really about multitasking or getting things done, because she's primarily engaging with relaxation and entertainment type activities. So checking Wonderwall to get the latest celebrity news, or again, playing games, checking email for fun. Those are the types of activities that really come to the forefront with this behavior. So the second pathway is investigative spiderwebbing. We've probably all done this before. How many of you watch television with like a tablet in front of you so that you can quickly grab extra information if you want it, or go deeper on something? Maybe you watch Downton Abbey, and then you look up information about Victorian manor homes, and all of a sudden you have two screens going at the same time, and that second screen experience is amplifying what you're doing on the first screen. The search for content is really what's driving investigative pathways for moms. Again, it's somewhat habit-forming, but she really wants to find out more about something. And in particular, as a marketer, you can kind of give her, if you think about that spider web and how there's a content catalyst in the middle, and then she can kind of choose different pathways. And those are curated pathways, so she doesn't necessarily want so much choice that she's overwhelmed. But then she can certainly focus on kind of taking the pathway that's most relevant to her at any given moment. And again, it really makes that experience richer and deeper and satisfies a sense of curiosity. So moms are a little bit different from some of our other groups in the sense that they do more investigative spiderwebbing when it comes to shopping and information gathering. So they will do things like sort of watch a television show, get inspired potentially by an actress's dress, and then start looking up information through a spiderwebbing journey to find out where she might be able to purchase something similar. So that's an example of one of the activities and the motivations behind that activity that moms have. And then the third pathway is called social spiderwebbing. Again, it's the same pattern. There's typically a content catalyst in the center that starts to drive that sense of belonging and social behavior. So whereas once you might have been in your house watching live TV provides a great example, watching a sporting event, now you can actually make that a social event by reaching out and watching the event and then following a Twitter feed. And of course, through things like Xbox, you can start doing this in a really comprehensive way. Xbox has some capabilities where you can watch live stream the Grammys, for example, and then engage socially at the same time. So the need state here is very much about connection and belonging and transforming that experience into something that's more about community. Connecting with others is incredibly important, but one thing that's slightly different for moms is that they tend to want to respond and share very quickly. So they're not necessarily just taking in information on social networks, but they're actually quite active in that they're sharing out information at the same time more frequently than some of our other demographic groups. And you can see here, obviously, the activities that moms are engaging in here are primarily social, checking email, tweeting, looking at social networks. Those are all huge activities here. But she's also doing some relaxation and entertainment and some information gathering here as well. What's interesting about moms is that they use social not just in social platforms, not just to share from sort of a fun and entertainment perspective, but also to actually get valuable and pragmatic information. So ask advice from friends, give advice to friends. That's something that we see quite frequently. And what's also interesting about moms is that they are hypersocial within more pathways than any other demographic group. So you see for social spiderwebbing, 79% of moms have that social motivation behind it, but also for content grazing. So even among that sort of distraction behavior where you're taking in separate pieces of content at the same time, you see that social is much more prevalent as one of the sort of bits of bite-sized information that moms are taking in. And quantum, as well, is an activity that moms are doing where they might start a social conversation on their mobile phone and then continue that conversation on their PC or another platform. And in fact, quantum journeys are probably the most advanced consumer behavior. The mobile phone tends to be the bridge or the connective tissue among screens here, so it's incredibly important if you want to send consumers on a quantum journey that you have a very robust mobile strategy here. Checking movie times on the go. Maybe you want to check something when you're in line at the grocery store, but then purchasing those tickets later on a PC, that's an example of what consumers might be doing with a quantum journey. Now, moms are much more likely to seek out a better screen if they need it. So consumers do still have a sense of the appropriate screen for the job. And in fact, the expectations for technology and the expectations for brands to sort of be the enabler of these seamless pathways is incredibly high. And the sense of abandonment, particularly in the US, when you compare the US to other markets, if you don't have a seamless experience, is just phenomenal to me. An example, we actually worked with a brand who continually sort of wanted to have coupon codes on their packaging, which is something that the brands have done for a long time, but all over their Facebook page, consumers complain about the fact that in order to get this coupon, they have to go through 5 different steps. They have to find the packaging, they have to tear it off, they have to type in the code. This is not a seamless experience for consumers. What they want is for everything to sort of be stored in the cloud and for them to be able to access it anytime and anywhere. And you can see here that quantum activities are really the real multitasking. These are very pragmatic activities. This is all about getting things done. Consumers have a really specific goal, and if technology and brands can actually enable that goal, consumers have a much higher opinion of those brands than they would otherwise. So again, the mobile phone's critically important to this. This is a statistic from Forrester. Moms are absolutely super users when it comes to the mobile phone in the US. They're doing more advanced activities on the mobile phone than many other demographic groups. But the good news for marketers is that moms are very open to brands, as long as brands are coming to them on their own terms. So again, we live in a day and age where consumers are pulling in content. They can turn on and off that faucet and get it whenever and wherever they want it. So it becomes critically important that brands are starting to think of the consumer's moment rather than just the marketer moment. So a couple key takeaways, and I'm just going to take you through a very quick example. The first is to invite and then delight. So before sending an interruptive message, particularly in more intimate environments like the mobile phone, invite consumers in, and then you can kind of give them the full immersive experience that can impress them with your brand. The second is to keep it seamless. So enabling that seamless interaction across screens becomes increasingly important, especially in those quantum journeys. Keep it contextual. So we all know what context means when it comes to content, but it's also critically important that we start thinking about context as it relates to the device. You can't just take your 30-second spot on TV and put it on the mobile phone. There's a different need state that consumers have when they're on their mobile. So it's time to start thinking about that a little bit differently. Spark conversation, especially with moms. They're incredibly social, and they use social not just for connection and belonging, but also to find information and get good advice. And finally, think personal and portable. So very quickly, I'm going to take you through an example here. We'll call our consumer Lindsay. She's watching television. She's content grazing here. So she has her Surface open, and she's going to browse through a beauty app while she's watching TV. The beauty app invites her in, and then she sees some hair care products that she wants to purchase. So she goes ahead and she moves over to her mobile phone, because obviously it's very seamless, and she adds 3 items to her cart based on what she saw within that Windows 8 environment. And at the same time, she's given this particular application some information about herself. And this particular application knows sort of the local shop that she likes to go to. And they also know that she's out of, she bought toothbrushes a couple months ago. It might be time for her to get a reminder. And in fact, they have a coupon. So she can go to the store while she's going to get her hair care products and also pick up some toothbrushes at the same time. And this is an example of an application when you're thinking personal and portable. Consumers, time and time again that I interview, are very willing. I mean, the consumer perspective on big data is, I understand that I'm going to get as good as I give. They're very willing to give information to brands as long as the brands are actually delivering something of value back in return. So this is an example of a personalized skincare app that can make recommendations and certainly deliver coupons and deals and specials to her based on her skincare needs. I'm just going to go ahead and go into the store. And when we think about social, it's not just about gigantic platforms. It's also about more intimate one-to-one moments. This is an example of sparking conversation because her fiancé gets a notice that says she's at the mall. Does he need anything? He can easily tell her, sure, can you pick me up some shaving cream while you're there? And then finally, she goes to the store. She's able to download that mobile coupon that she got right there on her mobile phone, purchase everything that she's been looking for. And that is an example of a very seamless consumer experience. So with that, I think that is everything for me today. My time's up, but thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Kelly.